All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Winning Together show here. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have Sharon Alvarez, and I'm Chuck Mouse Jr. Just a quick note, I want to remind you that we've done a couple other videos that you can check out. We did one on how to cope with some of the layoffs that are happening, and then another one on how to build your career North Star. So please check those out and give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you like them. And so today we're going to dig into a subject that I think is going to resonate with a lot of folks. It's called imposter syndrome, and I think we've all felt this at some point during our careers. And Sharon, what are your thoughts on like maybe we could dig into and just sort of describing what it is for folks, and if so yeah, why don't you go ahead and start off with so your thoughts on what it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck. Hi, everybody. It's great to be back. So the imposter syndrome, there's different definition ways of looking at it, but generally speaking, is when we feel that when we doubt our accomplishments, our skills, our experience, and when we feel that while everybody's merit is based on a true accomplishment, our merit is not based on accomplishment at all. So oftentimes, when we have the imposter syndrome, we have a fear of we feel that we are a fraud. We have a fear of being a fraud, a fear of being a failure, and we credit generally our success or to luck, voilà, just to luck when it's not true. So we feel unworthy of praise and attention. So, for example, I'm sure you might have been in this situation when we receive praises from your colleagues or even from your manager, and you feel uncomfortable because you don't believe you deserve those praises. And so it's loosely defined with doubts of your abilities.
Yeah, and well, let's dig into a little bit of like who's impacted. I mean, it's not just one group of folks, is it?
Yeah,
It's really everyone.
you're right, Chuck. It's literally everyone. You know, it could be it's men, women, executives even feel the imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
CEOs. Nobody is excluded. It could be your colleagues, managers, people managers, parents. So it's really everybody. In fact, interesting, Chuck and I were talking about Einstein. He also felt that he was also suffering from the imposter syndrome. I think he called himself involuntary swindler, right?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, and there's so many ways to look at it. I did see another I won't say definition, but just as kind of experiences. Studies show that those who are different than their peers, right? And it could be anything, right? And we're familiar with some of the challenges of women in tech, but it could be that experience. It could be a first time college student going through college, right? Like the first person in their family to go to college. And it really is something that impacts people from all different backgrounds and kind of in lots of different scenarios.
Yeah. And it could be also
Yeah.
could happen at a different stage of your life. You know, like you mentioned, first time student or intern. So it could be when you take on a new situation, a new project, a new initiative. When I joined my company at the moment, Salesforce, I felt the imposter syndrome. You know, I was exposed to extremely smart colleague, and I navigated the first 2 to 3 months having the imposter syndrome, definitely. So any changes in your life, any new situation, tend to create that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've been through some job changes as well. And the company before the one I started at recently, I remember it was a completely different industry, and so while I was, hired for a particular job as a manager, um, I still felt a little bit of imposter syndrome because I mean, there's all this new stuff that I didn't know, and I had to learn, along the way. But at the end of the day, it provided to be a fruitful and, really, there's a lot of growth and learning that happened in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, talking about growth, really interesting. We saw that the research showed that 70% of people are going to feel the imposter syndrome at some point in their life. And for the 30% other, actually, what the research has shown is that if they don't feel the imposter syndrome, it's often because they don't stretch themselves. So you're
Yeah.
talking about growth. So it's actually healthy, it's feeling the imposter syndrome is not necessarily something bad. And in fact, the name, I think we started thinking about how we label it. Syndrome is, referred to almost a disease, something that's negative. And we don't think it's necessarily bad. In fact, yeah, the research has shown in the last few years that there are benefits to feeling the imposter syndrome for
Well,
managers.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on 2 points that I really like there. And you mentioned like the 30% that don't feel it. They're sticking to what's familiar. They're not growing and trying to learn. So there's stagnant growth there, right? They're not wanting to be vulnerable and try something new, right? And it's as much as maybe we don't like to hear that, but that's our growth comes from uncomfortable situations, from showing courage and vulnerability and trying new things and changing. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting statistic. And you mentioned syndrome that sort of has that connotation that there's something wrong, but really, like when we get in these situations, it's really kind of a natural reaction in the way our brain works a little bit. We have we have a prefrontal cortex, which is in the front end, but it has a lot of control over our strategy and vision about what we want to do, right? So that's us thinking like, yeah, I want to go try this role because I want to learn something new, I want to grow, and this is the direction I'm going to, that career North Star, perhaps. This is the next step. But then there's the limbic system, and I think people have heard the amygdala hijacking. This is the fight or flight situation. This is change. This is different. This is scary, So a lot of times that really sort of overrides that prefrontal cortex. So, you know, so I think, there's some ways that we can work on trying to combat, these emotions and feelings that we have. Um, and I think that's important, So some ways to do that really is sort of digging into positive psychology, right? And that's really the science around how we thrive. And so I think it's trusting, first of all, believing in yourself and trusting in that, whatever situation you're in, you were that first generation college student, you got accepted, right? Into that program. They want you there, or they hired you, they want you there. And those are some terrific steps to sort of build some trust within yourself.
Yeah, this is so true. It's really, it resonates a lot with me. I was saying earlier that when I joined Salesforce, I had the imposter syndrome for a few months because I kept meeting extremely brilliant and smart people. And what I did to combat that feeling, I reminded me the interview process. I went through 12 interviews over a period of 3 months and with SVPs and VPs. So the interview process was really long, really serious, very professional. And, I reminded myself that, hey, if I made it, it means that I'm worth the role, right?
Yeah.
And I have a place in my company. So I think, like you mentioned, anchoring and reminding ourselves of our value, the reason why we are where we are great things to do in order to, address the imposter syndrome. I have another example, really cool example. I was selected to speak at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in 2019 about my experience, the work I led, the transformation work I led at T-Mobile. And before I spoke, I was extremely intimidated, and I really felt that this wasn't for me. I didn't deserve, to present. And I was talking to Dominica de Grandis. And she said something amazing that really stayed with me until today. I think it's going to stay with me forever. She said, listen, Sharon, if you have been selected to speak at this summit, it's because you have a story to tell, and only you can tell that story. So you are all in this situation. If you are somewhere in a role, it's because you have been selected to perform in this role. So remind that to yourself, and you only can perform in the role and in the fashion that you're going to be performing. So everybody has extreme value. Yeah, so it's important to remind ourselves constantly that we have a value to bring.
Yeah, and that, some of those feelings that you had, there's some terms called like, the saboteur. It's this little gremlin that's sort of whispering in their ear, like, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? And then I think what Dominica did was just, was fantastic, and that, she helped remind you that you knew you were there for a reason. Your talk was selected. You had it, and it's such a competitive process, and you do have a unique voice. And yeah, sometimes that's all we need to hear, is just a little bit of that reflection back to reassure us. And then also, there's some ways to keep reminding ourselves, every day too, that, we are here, for a reason in this particular activity that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah. So there are a few things we can do to fight the imposter syndrome, and so there are things we can do that I would call techniques that can help you when we feel it. But if you really want to address it in a more sustainable fashion, I think there's deeper work to be done, understanding where it's coming from and so on. So I worked with a coach a little while ago, in fact, when I joined Salesforce. And so the work was really helpful because he helped me understand why I was feeling like that. And I think it has to do sometimes with when we feel the imposter syndrome, it's also because we doubt ourselves, but also we're comparing ourselves to others. And what's really important is not to compare ourselves to others, but to constantly compare ourselves to ourselves in the past few days. So we have to, comparing is natural, but we need to compare ourselves to ourselves the previous day, the previous week, the previous year, where we are today in comparison to where we were yesterday, and so on. So there's deeper work to be done, and I highly recommend, if you feel the imposter syndrome, you have it on a regular basis, talk to a coach, talk to your friends. It's important to not isolate yourself. And I think there's a stigma. We talked about the syndrome word, right? So disease has a negative connotation. And because of that, we are hesitant, reluctant to talk about it. But it's really important to talk about when you feel it, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends, talk to your manager, share that you often or sometimes have a feeling of imposter when you are in meetings and when you are, given a task, and your manager can help you with that. But there are other practices as well, Chuck.
Yeah, I think you mentioned one of them was the You Are Remarkable program.
Yeah.
At Google. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Google created an initiative. I highly recommend you to check it out. And the website is simply iamremarkable.com. And they kicked off that initiative to help actually women and diversity, but also men, to fight their, imposter syndrome, and to build actually, I would say the core idea is to help people build confidence in their abilities. And so they have trainings, and you can take a training. It's fantastic. I took the training, but you can also become a facilitator. So you'll have to take the trainer workshop, and you can become a I Am Remarkable facilitator. So in my company, it's a program that's sponsored in my company. It's very active, actually. And we even have a Slack channel where anybody can post every day, I am remarkable because I completed this task, or I am remarkable because I did something on the personal side, right, at home. You can see posts such as, I am remarkable because I'm raising my son, and all kind of stories. It's pretty amazing actually, and it helps boost that confidence, self-awareness, and it's really fantastic. Yeah.
I love that. And the one thing that it makes me think of is it's practicing gratitude for yourself, but like your whole self, right? And something else practice that I used and working with a coach a couple of years ago was at the end of the day, jotting down a couple of things that you're really proud of accomplishing. And it was interesting after I did that for a few weeks, I was going over that with my coach, and I realized I was only focusing on work too. So I was like, oh well, I wasn't jotting down that. Yeah, I was proud for like taking a walk, right? And getting out and doing some exercise or just doing little things to make sure I was taking care of myself as well. Um, and the same thing goes, kind of going back to that positive psychology vibe, and creating those experiences, but practicing that in the morning as well. Like when you kick off the day, what are you grateful for? I think those are some very powerful things, to very powerful practices. Another thing I really think is a great thing a great exercise is the VIA character strengths. It's VIA. It's free. It's online, and it's a little bit like the Strength Finders program, which is Clifton Strength Finders, run by I think Gallup, and it's a little bit like that, but it's just a little bit more whole person, right? So it'll incorporate things like humor and kindness, and some different character traits. And then those change depending on like kind of where you're at in life when you're taking that. You might want to do it every couple of years, depending on like kind of what's going on, and see what kind of character traits,
Mm-hmm.
rise up to your top 5. But those are some things to really kind of get in touch with who you are and better understand that, what's going on as you're going through these different, challenges that you're experiencing.
I love it. I love it, Chuck. The
Yeah.
gratitude book and the characteristic assessment, those are great practices. I do
Yeah.
have the gratitude books, but I realize it's not so much, about work. It's more personal. I write every day about 2 to 3 things I'm grateful for. And you're right. It's really fantastic how it help increase your level of happiness and confidence. And
Yeah.
so some similar things you can do is write down your strength, when you work
Hmm.
on a project, and the strength that you are adding to this project, write down those strengths. And
Yeah.
one thing that's interesting, I haven't done it actually, but we always receive feedback, positive and feedback, and also areas of
Hmm.
opportunities. But when we receive feedback, we don't write them down. But I think keeping a log of all the feedback positive
Yeah.
feedback you receive, because you forget about those, right? I think we have a tendency to remember the negative feedback and forget the positive one faster. I think write down all the positive feedback you receive from your colleagues, your manager in particular, and keep a log, and once in a while look at those, look at
Yeah.
you review the feedback you got in the last 2 to 3 months, and I think it's a huge morale booster, and it's a huge confidence booster. so
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
so those are some
Um,
of the practices you can do. Yeah, so to conclude, there are a few things that we can do in order to tackle our imposter syndrome. The first thing is to drive awareness, to create that awareness when we have imposter syndrome. So take some time, pause, dedicate some time to reflecting on it, analyzing it. So the first thing is really awareness. The second thing is the knowledge. So when you analyze it, look at when you're having the imposter syndrome, why, what are the people you're comparing yourself to, because it may be because you admire them. It could be for other reason. And the third step is to create an action plan, right? What are the activities you can do in order to address the imposter syndrome when you feel it at work?
yeah. I think that sums it
Voilà.
up very well, Sharon. And we thank everyone again for listening to us. And again, it's Winning Together with Sharon Alvarez and Chuck Mouse Jr. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Bye.
Thank you.